Notes. What are real estate notes? How do they work? How do they compare to investing in real estate? That's what we're going to talk about this morning. So we'll be back in 45 seconds. Good morning, sub-tours. Welcome to Goat Talk for June the 30th, 2022. Gosh, if you guys are watching this episode of Goat Talk on my Facebook wall, you may want to get over to YouTube and subscribe to our channel. This will be the last week that we actually put that on my wall over there. So get over there and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're watching us anywhere else, get over there and subscribe to our YouTube channel. So we put out a lot of videos each and every week on a lot of topics with real estate investing, creative finance, and that sort of thing. So get over there and subscribe to the channel. If you're new here, my name is William Tingle. I've been a real estate investor for over 23 years, and Goat Talk is our weekly Facebook and YouTube live training on creative finance. So I want to thank you for being here with us today. If you would, in the comments, please let us know who you are, where you're at, and what your favorite type of investing is. We would love to have you do that. So if you're looking for the very best, most affordable training in real estate, we would invite you to check us out at $7coaching.com. We'll teach you how to buy houses subject to for $7 a month. You won't beat that deal anywhere, I guarantee you. Guys, today we are talking about notes. What are notes? What are real estate notes? How do they work? How are they different from buying houses? Just real estate investing. And we've got an expert here with us this morning, Mr. Chris Seveney. Welcome to Go Talk, Chris.
Morning, William. How are you today?
Man, we are doing fantastic here in Apollo Beach, Florida. How are you?
I'm doing good. I was thinking of launching a training for $6.99 just to, get below you. But anybody that has the $7 training must do it because they love it, because they're not making money off of it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, we enjoy teaching, and a lot of people can't afford this high dollar stuff. So, we'll teach you how to do it and keep it affordable for you. That's why we do it.
Great.
So Chris, tell us about you. Tell us, Chris is, well, I'm not going to introduce him. He's here. He can do it. But Chris is an expert in notes. It was introduced to me a while back. Tell us about you and how you got started note investing.
Yeah, I got started in note investing kind of by luck in one way. So about a decade ago, my wife and I were doing some new construction and some fix and flips, or buy and hold, actually. And we had 2 kids at the time. And after that, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, it's way too much time this is taking. We can't, handle and manage this. So, me being entrepreneurial was on bigger pockets, just trying to find alternative investment strategies, other ways to, build wealth and do it in a not as much passive form, but do it in a way that doesn't, eat up so much time during the day. And at first I started looking at tax liens, and I kind of shrugged those aside because I looked at them and saw, well, kind of anybody can do that. You do some due diligence, you just buy it. But after you buy it, there's really not, to me, there wasn't much to do. And I stumbled across notes, and I was a little ticked off when I found out about it, because I'd been in real estate for like 20 years and realized, wait, you can do this? I knew about private lending, but I didn't know you could actually buy distressed debt or assets on the secondary market. So that's really how I got started. I took some money. I was in the process of switching jobs at the time. So I took some money from my 401k and moved it over instead of putting into my new employer, which again is one of those things that ticked me off because nobody tells you that, oh, that's the option. Usually they say you got two options: leave it with your current employer or move it to your new employer. Not, oh no, you could self-direct this, or if you have a company, do a solo 401k. And so I took some money from that. And instead of paying for some high dollar training, I went out and just, kind of bought, 4 notes. Like I said, they were low dollar, and started working those out, and started just to slowly scale. I wasn't somebody who on my first go around wanted to go buy 50 assets or 100 assets. Right. I knew, that it was something that I'd have to slowly scale. And, 6 years ago, that's where I started. Now we're up over 500 notes and counting.
Right. Now, I remember seeing on your website this astronomical number of the number of notes that you bought or managed over the years. What was that number, Chris?
Yeah, it's 500 plus. I've lost track of, how many overall we've bought. Every year we kind of will do another analysis. At any period of time, we're managing approximately 250. I think right now we're just over 250, but it will float between, plus or minus. But we're also in the process of scaling, doing kind of taking up a whole nother notch. And I've brought on, let's see, I have 3 employees working for me right now. I have 2 more starting in July, and I have 2 more starting later this fall. Or 3 more starting later this fall. So we'll be up to about staff of 8. So we're really looking to scale.
Right. And the dollar value on the notes that you bought and managed is what? That was the insane number. It's like $1 billion.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, 750 million. That's my real estate career in general.
Right.
Yeah. So basically, in today's dollars, it's well over $1 billion of projects I've managed, built, overseen, including notes. I've built 24-story high-rise buildings. I've built federal government court. I built the Supreme Court of the Army's courthouse. That was a really cool project. Wow. So throughout my full-time career in real estate, working for developers, general contractors, that number's over $1 billion.
Right. That's awesome. Hey guys, Farouk, good to see you this morning. Corey's on here, learning about notes. He says he listens to Chris's podcast almost daily. So
thank you.
On here. Ethan's taking notes. Andrew's here. Good to see you guys. If y'all have questions, make sure you put those in the comments. We'll make sure we get to those today. So, Chris, if I'm a new investor, I'm listening here, maybe the first time, I'm not familiar with how it works. What is a note?
Yep. A note's an IOU. Really, it's a document. It's usually about a 3-page document that is outlining the terms of a loan you got from somebody. It's who's the borrower, who's the lender, how much do you owe them, how long you're going to pay, how much you're paying them monthly, what's your interest rate, and how long is that term. That's really what a note is. A lot of people do confuse a note and mortgage. They say, oh, I got a mortgage on your house, which is true, or deed of trust. In that document is the ball and chain, is what I like to say. If you do not fulfill the obligations of the note, because in real estate, we buy secured debt, that mortgage or deed of trust is what securitizes that note to the property that allows you to, if need be, go after that property to satisfy the note.
Right. Okay, so you talk about buying distressed notes. Is that primarily what you guys do, buy distressed?
Yeah, probably 3/4 of our portfolio. We like to have a balanced portfolio because when you're buying distressed notes, a lot of times those borrowers aren't paying, and you want to have some performing loans coming in the door, of course, to provide some cash flow as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So and again, for people that are new or they're listening here, we're talking about distressed notes. We're talking about people that in our world of just real estate investing, we would call maybe pre-foreclosures, situations like that, where they've stopped paying. Whoever is holding that note and mortgage isn't getting any income, so maybe they're motivated just to sell it.
And when we're saying distress, we're not talking about the people who've missed a payment, or 2 payments behind. we're talking people who, the next date due on their mortgage is 2015, 2017, 2018. They're serious delinquencies of 90 plus more days behind.
Right. So you're talking about people that haven't paid for years. So it sounds like you're not buying notes from a typical real estate investor. You're probably buying from someone who maybe sold with seller financing. It was a one-time deal for them. They don't have huge portfolios of notes.
Yeah. So that's one, we do buy from some people like that. The majority of places we buy right now are from, other funds. And the way typically, loans work is a bank may originate them and then they sell them off, to securitize them through like Fannie. They get put into a pool and securitized. And then if they go distressed, they'll get pulled out of the pool. And those that get pulled out will get sold to like very large funds.
Right.
And then, like any company, they buy a lot of things, they keep some, they sell some, and eventually it kind of, drips down to investors like myself who go out to buy some of those assets. But like you also, we get people sometimes who have originated maybe 3 or 4 notes and they need to cash out or the person's not paying and they have no clue how to handle it. And they're like, we just want to sell this and want our cash.
I got you. So if I'm new to note investing, what would you recommend is maybe the best place for me to go to find a note to buy?
If you're just getting started, I would tell people to start on some of the online exchanges. There's one called Paper Stack. There's another one called Deb Expert. There's 3 or 4 of them that, basically if people listen to our podcast or, hop over our Facebook group or something, we list all that stuff for Facebook note groups. Any note group doesn't have to be mine. You can find some of those, but Paper Stack is one that's very user friendly because that's a lot of individuals who may only have 5 or 10 notes that are also, looking to sell. And again, I'll call it, retail pricing on those. So you're not going to get the best deal, but as you're just getting started, typically you're not compared to buying something in bulk. It's like buying something at the store compared to buying it at Costco.
Right.
So, but you can still make money. It's just a matter of, you're going to make a little bit less.
Right. Now, I've been doing this for a long time. And after you've been doing something for a long time, you find out, I guess it's kind of like the difference between going on the MLS and buying an investment property and finding a seller with an off-market property that you can buy for a lot less. You might buy that for 50 cents on the dollar. And I've talked to a lot of guys before who do research at the courthouse looking for people who have seller finance notes and done things like that. And then they'll contact them and ask about, buy that note from them at a discount. Do you do much of that or know people who do?
I know people who do. For us, we don't. And it's more because of trying to scale and the amount of time people spend at the courthouse than to do the mailings. Right. It can be a little more challenging. On real estate, I think you can get a much better deal buying conventional real estate in that manner because there's a lot more people looking to sell their house potentially off market than there are people who have, just think of how many houses versus seller finance notes and then people who want to sell that note. And then a lot of times, even though when people go to sell it, they really don't want to discount it significantly.
Right. Okay, so that's what you don't think that's a good thing to pursue as far as buying notes that way. You think just buying them on the market where someone has one for sale is probably a better way.
To start, as you grow, there's people who do that as a niche and they're very good at it and they'll spend, thousands of dollars a month marketing, but they get the deals brought to them as they come. So it's something, I'm not saying it's something you shouldn't do. It's something that getting started might be a little harder. And I think when you're buying your first deal, I think if you can have kind of the deal right in front of you, because understanding notes and how that process works, I think is very important to then understand later on when you're chasing potentially, people, private sellers, it will give you more leverage in understanding the process.
Gotcha. Okay. Andrew's got a question. Does it ever make solid sense, and is it a solid use of time and energy to go direct to private note holders instead of those exchanges. I think that's just what we talked about, basically.
Yeah. One thing I'll mention though is, if you find some funds who, and one way to look at it is, again, if you're going to counties, you can look at the assignments and where are they being assigned to, and look up some of those entities. If you get a good relationship with a small, medium-sized fund, this business is so driven about relationships, and I'd say very similar to like if you work with a wholesaler. If you've got a wholesaler who you work with and you've done several deals with them, and then somebody comes out of the blue and might be a little bit higher than you, 9 out of 10 times that wholesaler is probably still going to give you the deal because they know you're going to close it versus potentially working with that other person.
Right.
And that's the same thing in notes. I've had people tell me all the time, hey, look, can you close by this date? Because I know you're going to close. We need to get these off our books. And they'll say like, hey, you weren't the high bidder. And again, sometimes they may just be blowing sunshine up your, but I've known on occasion with some brokers of notes who I've talked with said, hey, look, you weren't high, but they know you're going to close the deal. So they're going to give you the deal.
Right. So if I'm new to investing, again, I'm trying to look at this from a beginner's standpoint, because I'll tell you, I didn't really put it all together. I went on they used to, it was Bill Mincaro, I think, that used to have these note boat cruises.
Yep.
When I first got started investing, that was over 20 years ago. And I didn't know anything about notes, but I went because I could write off the vacation. So I just went. And I would sit in and listen to these guys, and they would talk about things like selling part of your note, selling part of your income stream for a chunk of cash, and then keeping the rest of the payments. I mean, it was all just incredible stuff. I couldn't grasp all of it. And I realized that I actually create notes when I sell with seller financing, right?
Yep.
So I'm sort of in the note business, but I create all of them to keep them. So I guess what I'm asking is, if I'm looking at a note to purchase, how do I know it's a good note? What is the process of due diligence? I know what it is for a house, but what is it for a note?
Yeah. So great question. With the note, and I'm just going to talk about first position liens because that's primarily what we do. If you're talking HELOC seconds, there's a little bit different philosophy that, again, we could spend hours and days talking about. But on the first position note, really, you're kind of similar to a house. One of the main things you want to look at is the property itself. What is that worth? And it's challenging because you don't get to go inside that house. It's not a house like you're owning or you're buying. You're just buying the loan on it. So you can send people by to get an idea what the value is. But I can tell you, if it's a distressed note and somebody gives you comps, make sure they're not comps of the upgraded houses in the neighborhood, because I've never seen a distressed borrower put a brand new kitchen in a house or, update the bathrooms.
Right.
Updated bathrooms might mean they updated to put a toilet in it. So that's so I would compare it to other REOs in the area is one thing. And that's one mistake I think people make is sometimes they comp them to, nicer properties. And then really looking at the pay history in the borrower to get an understanding of what's going on in their minds. Was it something where they lost a job? Was it a divorce? Was it short, or is it somebody who just pays like once every 3 months, and because the lender really didn't push the issue, they're just playing the system? And that's, again, another thing. If you're going to buy something, it's something you ask for. People sometimes are timid to ask for that. It's like, no, you absolutely want to get the pay history and then the comments, which are all the conversations back and forth between the lender, servicer, and that borrower. And if it's with a licensed servicer, typically all those calls are recorded. So they're all then kind of taken into notes and put in the system. So if it ever were to go into any type of litigation, all that information's there.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. So, because I was wondering, I know if I'm buying a note, it sounds to me like it's pretty similar to if I'm buying a property that has a tenant in it. that's not paying, and that's why the landlord's selling to me. I probably can't speak to the tenant.
Yeah.
I can't look at the property. So what that does is it drives the cost that I'm willing to pay way down.
Yep.
Because of that.
Yeah.
So,
One thing I forgot to mention, a part of looking at, the other key area you want to look at is the title. You know, what's the title to the property? Look at. You know, some of these seller finance deals where they just quick claim deeded them from one to the other and so forth.
Right.
You know, you want to make sure A, title is clean on these, and B is taxes. You know, what's the status of the taxes on the property? Because when you're in first position, you know, the really only way you can really get, you know, slapped across the head is if you didn't pay the taxes and the significant taxes or penalties on the property, or you really underestimated the value of the property, or overestimated, I'm sorry, the value of the property.
Right. Do you ever buy notes in unusual circumstances? Like, let's say, for example, we only buy property subject to.
Yeah.
Okay, so everything that I buy is going to have a loan on it. Let's say, for example, that I have a house that I bought subject to. The house is worth $200. It's got an underlying mortgage on it with Bank of America for $125. And I sell this house with seller financing for $200, the full value of the house. If I decided I wanted to liquidate that note for my equity position of $75,000, well, let's say obviously our buyer's going to give us money down, so let's just say they gave us $20,000 down, and I create a note for $180. Now it's got an underlying of $125. Would you be interested in that note?
Yes, but we'd probably, because it's in a second position, have to really do a little more analysis to make sure it has equity in it. Because if it didn't have equity or was upside down, then the borrower filed bankruptcy, then you can get into, you know, getting completely wiped out from the loan. So yeah, that would be something, you know, like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of, I view that as being a second position, which, you know, we've bought, but it's not our primary, our primary bread and butter.
Like, yes, just based on your experience, your many years of experience with this, let's assume that note that I'm interested in selling to you is on a house that's in good condition. The payer has been there for 2 years. They pay on time. We've got that documented. We ran them through a mortgage broker to qualify them, and they have okay credit. It's not great, but it's okay. We did all of those steps. What just ballpark do you think that note would be worth?
It really bases off of the terms. You know, with notes, it's all about the velocity of money.
Right.
So, and I know you've mentioned you do a lot of yours at 30 years.
We do ours at 40.
40, yeah. Okay. So as a note buyer, to us, that's not really ideal because if we want to get our money back, let's say, you know, the rule of 72, basically, you know, so let's say you wanted to get your money back in 6 years, which would be a 12% return. You know, the payment on a 40-year term versus a payment on a 10, 15, or 20-year term is going to be significantly different.
Right.
So that's why it would take us longer to get our money back. So we probably need to discount it more.
Okay.
But what I've seen, you know, also, instead of you possibly selling it, what you mentioned earlier about kind of breaking it up, let's say you've written that note at 9%, or just, you know, but let's say you have an investor who's happy with like 6%. You could sell them a payment stream at 6%, and basically hypothecate, you know, the note as a term, or sell a partial of that note, where let's say you're getting $400 a month at 6%, it would only be a $300 payment. So they would give you lump sum money up front, you know, whatever that term is, and then they get $300 a month for the next period of time. Right. Now you just kind of basically almost took like a line of credit against that note. Right. And then you can go out and do another subject to, you can go, you know, do whatever you want with that money. I always recommend people reinvest it. Don't go buy a new car. But then again, you're basically somewhat arbitraging that note by them paying you 9 and then you having an investor at 6.
Okay. So I think what I heard you say is, if I'm collecting $400 a month in cash flow,
Yep.
I can sell a number of payments to an investor who wants a smaller return than I'm getting, and give him 300 a month of that $400 a month cash flow. So I got a chunk of money. I'm still getting a little bit of cash flow every month until his number of payments is satisfied. Well, that's just amazing stuff, man. I mean, just things that as a real estate investor I've never thought about.
Yeah, and you think about it and people are like, oh yeah, it's like, okay, is it really worth it if you do one or two? Do like 50 of them and then go look at the numbers and what they look like. And all of a sudden, it can be pretty impressive to the tune of you can have, set up, 5 years down the line where, after they, you pay them, those other people paid off, you can have streams of, 10, 20, 30,000 a month. Right. Now, the benefits to it as well is, it lessens your tax burden at this point in time. So if you right now are, also like working a W-2 job in a high tax bracket or whatever the case may be, you're deferring some of those payments. So you're also deferring the full taxes, which on notes is considered ordinary income. So, it can be viewed as kind of a tax, deferment essentially as well.
Okay, awesome. All right, Gene has a question. When I'm trying to sell the notes, what are the main documents a buyer would need to see in order for them to make a decision on buying it?
Okay, so they would want to see a copy. So typically, you'll hear a term called soft collateral, which is kind of an emailed version. Definitely want to see the note. If the note has ever been sold, typically when a note is sold, it's transferred by an allonge. So you'd want to see basically the history of all the sales of that, which is just a piece of paper called an allonge. A copy of the mortgage, a copy of any assignments, again, if they were sold. If there's a title policy, that's important. Somebody would want to see the title policy. They would want to see the pay history of, how has this borrower been paying. They would want to see the servicing notes as well. So all the notes that have gone on. It's not as important, but it's good to have is, having the origination docs. And what I mean by that is the 1003 application, the initial credit report. A lot of the stuff that we buy, I'd say that's probably only in there about 30% of the time. But also depending on the age of the note, if the note was originated 8 years ago, that information's so outdated and old, it's useless at today's, time as well. If it was originated 6 months ago, I would absolutely want to see that information.
Right.
Those are some of the things I think of off the top of my head. If you want to reach out to me, I have a checklist that I follow, that, we request for people to see. If it's distressed, we'd ask if there's any legal correspondence or if legal had started on it, if there were demand letters sent or any type of legal that's taken place as well.
Okay. And if people want to contact you, they can do that at your website, 7einvestments.com.
Correct.
Okay. And Chris, you do a podcast as well, I know. What is the name of that podcast?
Yep. So it's called the Good Deeds Note Investing Podcast. We're actually in the process of rebranding it, and we're changing the name to Creating Wealth Simplified. It's still going to be a lot about notes, but we're going to bring up other avenues, and we're actually going back a little bit to starting out for a lot of people who are getting involved in investing, notes or others, just about, certain topics of even like setting up an LLC or the types of team players. So we're trying to really give actionable content and items for people, not just talk, but during every episode, but also give people the information they need to take actionable steps.
Sure. That's awesome. Now, you mentioned something in your checklist that you would be looking for. And one of the things was details, payment history from a loan servicer. What kind of hit will my note in value, as far as value goes, what kind of hit will it take if I don't use a servicer, if I service my own notes?
It depends on two things. One is the state, because certain states can be very peculiar if it's not serviced by a loan. And one of them that most people wouldn't probably think about is North Carolina. North Carolina, if it's distressed, is very peculiar. In a lot of these states now, if it is in default, they want to see a full pay history of that loan. So what that means is they want to see some type of reporting from the beginning of that loan of all the payments. Now, if you keep good records of that and can provide it in a Excel sheet that shows when the payment came in and how it was applied, meaning how much went to principal, how much went to interest, how much went to escrow, that's very important. A lot of people just will say, oh, here's a check and kind of here it is. And then it came in 15 days late or a month late. Did they or did they not apply late charges? It can get a little convoluted. If you had copies of the checks, then you could almost, that would be beneficial. You could recreate it. But if it's somebody who literally just is like, oh, I get a check and I deposit it and cash it, and I know it was for 10 years and I don't know, I think I got 90 payments from the guy. I'm kind of don't know. And they're, people who kind of just, back of napkin accounting. It's perfectly fine to do that for the time being, but if it ever goes into default, it can be very challenging for you to go back, to get it. Because one of the things along with that is not only about collecting payments, but you're also supposed to send out notices if it's owner occupied. And you either got to send a monthly. I mean, some people still can send the coupon books. I know one servicer that actually still does that, but which is still allowed. But typically now you're supposed to send a monthly statement that also has all this government language on it. And if you're not sending statements, I believe there's rulings out there that you're not allowed to collect like late interest or certain types of interest. And again, don't quote me for this, not a lawyer. But, if there's additional fees and stuff and you're not putting on a statement, I know some courts may not allow you to collect it.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Our next question is Carol, do you ever interact with the borrower when you're purchasing a note?
So great question. So there was a point in time where I would have some interaction with the borrower, but then I stopped. So I let the servicer deal everything with the borrower. Typically the borrowers usually don't even know who the owner of the note is. If you're using a servicer, they just think the servicer is the owner of the note.
Right.
Which, for us, I actually think that's better, in that sense. But, we've stopped the servicers, they're trained at it. They know what they say, they cannot say, plus what it costs for a servicer, versus your time and effort to try and chase people down. Right. And what happened was, little story was we started doing it, contacting borrowers. And then what I found is a lot of borrowers are like kind of that ex-lover. They'll leave you alone and all of a sudden something happened. And then literally you will get 47 phone calls in 45 minutes. And they will just blow up your phone until you answer it and so forth. And really just, it's like, oh my God, I had one borrower who completely was ignoring us. And then we sent a demand letter. And then she literally in a span of 10 minutes called 16 times. I was in a meeting. So I'm like, I can't answer the phone, but I'm looking and it was number after number after number. And I would basically, be like, oh my God, and left like 7 messages, going crazy on the phone. And I'm like, I don't get, I don't get, quote unquote get paid enough to deal with this. I'd much rather pay the servicer, the $20 a month, to do it.
Right. Well, and that's another thing, Chris. I've never, since I got started, like I said, I've been doing this for a long time. And initially, there weren't so many servicers, and and I've seen some that were pretty expensive. They didn't do a great job. And your borrower could not pay for a month or two, and you literally wouldn't know about it. I've heard a million stories. So I've never recommended servicers. Now I know I met you, and you and I discussed this, and you said for the same reason that you started basically your own servicing company. So you guys have a company that services note. It's very affordable. It's what, $25 a month, I think.
Yeah, 25 with escrow.
Right.
If there's no escrow, I think it's $20. Yeah.
Mhm.
So myself and another investor, we invested in a company that we were very involved with the shaping and the services of the company. And we had somebody from the serving space who manages it day to day. And I think, again, it goes about education on things. And we had Shante, who runs it, I had her buy a note so she understands also as a lender some of the frustrations that lenders go through, so she could really see both sides of the coin. But like little things that we do. Every week we send out a report of all your loans, kind of what's going on and what's the goal for the week. So if somebody didn't pay a month, you would know. You don't have to log into a system. It's just a nice Monday evening, a checklist of, oh, here's what's going on. And if things are paying, it's just like, hey, borrower's current. So you just kind of can see those reports. And the other thing that I think, we've educated some investors on who do a lot of the seller finance side of things is, you can put in most states, again, because it's, I think, state specific, but typically you can put in there the cost of the servicing in the note. So basically the borrower's picking that up, just like an additional charge. No different than if they couldn't get insurance and you were putting, insurance on the property, it's added as a charge to that loan. You can do that. And, instead of, if you have 10 seller finance loans, instead of you trying to do all the numbers on them and then do the 1098s at the end of the year and stuff, the servicer does all that for you. That's part of their fees. And then if it does go in default, it's them picking up the phone, or if the payment's a week late, they know it's them picking up the phone calling, not you wondering like while you're on a vacation, oh, I got to call these people because they haven't paid.
Right. And what's the website for your loan servicing company?
Yeah, it's BIFI, BIFILS, as in loanservicing.com. So BIFILS.com.
Okay. BIFILS.com. Okay, we're going to put that up there for everybody.
Yep.
So they can.
And right now, licensed in 20 some odd states. There's certain states, North Dakota, South Dakota, there's not enough, people with notes in those states right now. We're working on some major states, California, Pennsylvania, and Florida. Those are very difficult states to get licensed in because, people think, Florida actually from a lending side is actually very challenging because you need to have all your documents and paperwork in order. Right. They're very peculiar about making sure everything's in order in Florida. Right.
And you, and I know you had said, I believe you're the one that gave me this tip. You said when you include in your contract with your buyer that they will pay for loan servicing, not to put the amount in there, because if it changes over time, you want to be able to adjust that.
Yeah. So if you got a 30-year loan, do you think your servicer is going to have the same costs now and in 2052? Probably not. So that's why you just put the cost. Or if you didn't like the servicer and you want to move it from one to the other, or something happens, one charges more, it's in there. It's included. Or, for example, say the loan wasn't on escrow and then you realize, we want to put this on escrow. Then, okay, that extra $5 or, whatever it is, can easily, hey, that's the cost.
Right. And you just include that as part of the escrow on your borrowers.
The servicing cost?
Yes.
Yeah, it's actually a third line item called other charges. So let's say the payment's $400 a month and your escrow's $100. So they would be $550, and then it would say $400 principal and interest, $100 for escrow, $50 other charges. And I'm just using $50 as an example, but it would be added as a third line item.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So Andrew said you run basic O&Es on early prospect notes, or do you order a full title report?
So first, I just want to mention, I don't order title until we have it under agreement. So when you bid, it's very indicative. It's kind of like putting an offer on a drive-by house. And then if they like the number, then you kind of really do your diligence, hire an inspector. Kind of on the notes, the same thing, where once you get under agreement, you'll run title. I typically run the full Monty, which is, called full title report or a two owner. And the reason why is a lot of the loans we see have changed hands many times. and some of them may not have a title report in them. Sometimes they do. If it was a newly originated loan with a title report, then you can just run a basic because you're going to be covered by that title report. But some of them have just changed hands so many times. When I'm saying so many, I'm talking like 10 or 15 times. The cost difference between standard O&E and the full Monte, it's like an extra, $30-$40. So for that peace of mind, usually that's what we'll do. But I know, some people who just run the single. And like I said, if it's a loan that's, been originated for a few years, you have the title report in the file, and, you would be fine by that, that O&E report, on that current owner, because, basically that loan has that insurance report. So if there was an issue from 20 years ago, you'd be covered in title. The concern, though, and this is one of the reasons why I order the 2, is I'd rather know about that issue, especially on distressed debt, because the last thing I want to do is realize as we're going to foreclosure when the attorney runs that title, oh, there's an issue, we have to file a title claim. Now 8 months later or a year later, depending on the impact of that title claim, it could be just they have to quiet title or reaffirm the mortgage or do something. We base our costs, especially on distress. Time is very sensitive to your return. So I would rather spend a few more bucks up front to double check to make sure there's not an issue that could cost me, a year of time, which would be worth a lot more than $40.
Right. If I create a note for a buyer and I'm trying to sell it later, does it affect the value of that note if there's not title insurance on that note?
Depends on who the buyer is. Certain buyers want to see that title policy.
Right.
Others, hey, if they run the report, it's a clean title. You just don't want to spend the money on the title report, and they've got confirmation it's clean title. Typically, I haven't seen people discount or heavily discount things because of that. Someone may use it as an excuse of why they'd want to discount it. Now, if you're selling it to, like there's a company out there called FNAC, First National, I forget what the AC stands for. They'll buy a lot of notes from people who do seller financing, and they want, the person to have, decent credit. They pay top dollar. They'll give you good money for your notes, by the way, people. But a lot of times they would like to see that title policy included as part of their due diligence.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Next question. Jody, would there ever be a reason to buy a non-performing note?
Oh, many reasons why to buy non-performing. And people ask, like, why are you buying something that somebody's not paying on? Well, let's take your situation you mentioned where that Bank of America $125,000 loan on $200,000 property. If I told you that I could buy that loan for, $70,000 and try and work out a new payment arrangement with the borrower where they give me $5,000 down, take all the other past dues, bump it to the end, and all of a sudden, let's say their mortgage payment was $1,000 a month. And then we work something out with them to maybe even knock the payment down $100, $900 a month. To get that borrower back on a payment plan can be extremely profitable. And when I say extremely profitable, from a returns perspective, you can get 20 to 30%, annual on a non-performing note. You can do better, you can do worse, but historically, like our target is, in that range. And we've been able to hit that range during our time. One thing that I'll just want to add on to that is I know a lot of people will buy a non-performing note to try and foreclose or try and get the property.
Right.
9 out of 10 times, I would tell you, you're going to be more profitable keeping that person in that house.
Right.
If they want to play ball.
That was my next question to you. How often do you try to rehab the borrower as opposed to just take the property?
Most instances. If they want to play ball with us, and what I mean by that is, can they afford the property? That's really the important thing. Is if you've got a borrower who's got, on Social Security at $1,200 a month and their payment's $800 a month, and they have other living expenses, they can't afford that, and there's really nothing you can do, unfortunately, unless you want to drop that payment down to like $300 a month. But in those instances, typically that they wouldn't be able to afford the taxes on the property either. But if somebody comes to us and say, hey, look, I've lost my job. I got laid off during COVID. I'm starting work next month. Can I start with this much? And what we'll do is what's called a forbearance plan, which is, I'll call it a pause, where if we had started legal, it basically just suspends everything. And if they make it through that forbearance plan of saying, okay, I'll pay $300 and $400 and $500 a month, or some type of plan that usually goes from 6 to 12 months. Then once they do that, we'll modify the loan. So we dismiss the foreclosure, the legal action, and then modify the loan.
Okay. So once you guys buy a note, you do all the things that I guess a big lender might do, like during COVID times, forbearance or a loan modification. You can, I guess, if you own the notes, you can structure any type of payment plan with your borrower that you want to.
You can do whatever. I mean, not whatever, but you can structure. Now, if you increase their payments, you do have to be careful because, if someone's paying $500 a month and you say, oh, okay, we'll do this and we'll make it $2,000 a month, borrowers will say whatever they say, anything to try and keep the property. So you have to also confirm their ability to repay if you do increase that payment amount. So that's one thing. It's just like you're originating a new loan. It's like, hey, can they afford this? You need to confirm they can afford that new payment. If you lessen the payment, typically you're giving them a benefit. So in those instances, I'm being advised the government wouldn't come after you for the ability to repay because you're actually reducing their monthly payment.
Right. Okay. Gene asks, when selling newly created owner finance notes that are RMLO underwritten, what type of discount do you typically look for?
Yeah. So we do, if we typically wouldn't do table funding, meaning we buy it right then and there. We like to see 6 months of seasoning on them. We'll like to target between a 10 and 12% return. So if you're originated at 90 cents on the dollar, 9% loan, depending on terms, we could be anywhere, some people pay up to 95%, 90, some people might be at 85. It's really dependent. Also depends on the state. Texas, for example, you go make a cup of coffee, you come back, you probably could have foreclosed on a borrower. Ohio, you can, take a cruise around the 3-year cruise around the world, come back and still be sitting in court. So, it really also is very dependent on the risk, because the last thing you want to do is, get dragged out in legal fees and time without getting money paid while you're still paying taxes and everything on those loans. So the state is very important as part of the risk and assessment. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see. We got a comment from Martin. A servicer is so worth it with notes. Okay. Farouk says, what states do you service notes in? Can I get a list?
Yeah, we'll send you the list. I'll just send you the list. It's most of the states people invest in. The Southeast, Texas, the Midwest, Mid-Atlantic.
Can I get that list at buyfils.com?
I believe it's on there. Another place people also can check is consumeraccess.org. So that's through the NMLS, which is the Nationwide Mortgage Licensing System, I believe. So that's a good place to check, because there's a lot of companies out there who will say they're servicers and they're technically not licensed. And I've run into issues in the past where all of a sudden I get a letter and say, oh, we're not going to be servicing your loans in the state anymore. And you got 30 days to go find a new home for them. And it's, and then when that happens, especially when the borrowers are paying, they're so used to sending their check out to the same place every month. They're not, most of them, when a loan may get transferred, they're not checking the mail. So they're like, oh, I didn't know. And then you're going to have someone chase down those payments. So, yeah.
Okay. Let's see. We've got another question. Matt asked, do you service Las
Vegas? Nevada right now, they're in the process of getting licensed in Nevada.
Okay. So soon?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Jumping around here a little bit. Let me see. Cindy Great show. Well, thanks, Cindy. Good to
Thank
see
you,
you
Cindy.
here from Mississippi. Let's see. Next question. Where and or how is the best way to find mortgage notes?
So we kind of touched upon that at the beginning, but like I said, there's some websites you can go to, PaperStack, DebExpert, or two just off the top of my head. You mentioned again reaching out to people who do seller finance. If you're going to do that, you probably know the better secrets than I do, William. But some people will go on to like ListSource where you can pull lenders, and I believe you can pull from ListSource who did seller financing or seller carryback within that county. I know DataTree has some systems that you can use for that as well. So that's an area that you can look at. Some people even do the next level of they'll pull a seller finance list and a delinquent tax list. So if it's something that's seller finance with delinquent taxes, that usually means either the lender really isn't managing it properly, or it's distressed, or kind of just is collecting payments but not paying too much attention. So that's another aspect where you can find a lot of information online, or certain counties do have their recorder's office online where you could do a search. And if you did that, I tell people do for a lender, do a keyword search like LLC. Or put in an IRA company's name. If you're using equity trust, put in equity trust as the lender and try and find out who, to see some of those seller finance notes, because all your major institutions, I don't think any of them go by LLC, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, PNC. So LLCs are typically more smaller companies that could be doing the lending.
I'll tell you, I was reminded of something yesterday that I had, it's funny, you do something a long time, you forget some of the basic stuff that was so helpful in the beginning. And when I was in Georgia, I was subscribed to basically a legal newspaper. And those guys, it was just a wealth of information. It was every deed that was recorded, every mortgage that was recorded, every divorce that was filed, all the way down to applications for commercial utilities. This thing was amazing. And we were actually looking at a new market yesterday and calling around trying to find out where to find the online information for trustee sales and things like that. And this particular place has a legal newspaper like that. And she sent us a sample. Of course, you can get it. We had to get it in paper form years ago, but now they'll email it to you. And this thing was incredible. I couldn't believe the information that was in there. So it's all right there in front of you. You don't have to go search, and you can find that stuff. So if you can find another newspaper.
So two other areas. One is, title companies can be your best friend because they're the ones who, a lot of times originate those. So if you can find a title company that does a lot of seller financing. The other, which is probably actually the easiest, go on Facebook and join some Facebook groups that involve notes. And then people in those groups put tapes out all the time. A tape is a list of assets. Or go in a group, say, hey, I'm new. I'm looking to get involved and I'm interested in possibly buying a note, maybe in a price range of A to B. And someone would be like, oh, I got this note that I've been thinking about selling. Hey, let me send you the information on it. Right. I've probably sold, 20, 30 notes like that, where people would just say, hey, I'm looking for a note in like Memphis, Tennessee. And I'm like, oh, I've got one in Memphis. And, hey, here's it is. Take a look at it. And, maybe it gets sold, maybe it doesn't, but at least you get some of that experience.
Right. Let's see. Matt said, what notes do you not buy?
Great question. I'll buy, I joke, I'll buy anything at the right price.
Right.
And what's not in my main buy box typically are second position liens. Are some contract for deeds used to be huge 3-4 years ago. Those have somewhat gone by the wayside because those are a pain in the what. I've got one right now. The guy's been paying for 7 years, but the guy lives in Florida now, and the house is in Ohio, so he doesn't mow the lawn. So I literally got a letter from the state representative because all the neighbors are complaining about it. And it's like, of course, my name's on the deed on a contract for deeds. So now we got to reach out to this guy, tell him to pay the mowing fines. Another one, if you ever work with Cuyahoga County, Ohio, you don't mow the lawn, you'll get a notice to go to court, and that it's a criminal offense that you can go to jail for 30 days for not mowing the lawn. And I think the fine is $400. This is a, you know, 3,000 square foot lot with a house on it. You know, they want $400 fine to mow the lawn, and they're going to come throw you in prison.
That's crazy. I've got a question. I assume there's a software you use specifically to manage so many notes, not lose track of things, or is it a simple CRM?
No, so for us, we bought software, the same software the servicers use. I would tell you that I probably spent $50,000+ in software, and people basically probably falling off their chair right now. But because I spent that money on software, I didn't have to hire anybody for the first 5 years of my business.
Right.
Okay. So think of, if I had to bring somebody on full time for 4 years, I could tell you it cost me a lot more than 50 grand. Cost me that per year, probably. Right. But you know, you can use simple CRMs. People use software, Pipe Drive. There's a company out there called, I think it's Note Rules, that they took like a Podio-based system and customized it just for notes. Note investors, I think he's like $40 or $50 a month. A lot of people go to that because it's something that's already been done. It's Podio-based, where a lot of people who are involved in real estate may use Podio already. So that's another avenue. Some people just start with Excel. You can start with Excel. You know, a lot of stuff that I manage, my to-do list, is all done through, you know, Microsoft Office tasks. We make sure we put everything into our software.
Okay. Victor had a question. Hey, Victor, good to see you. What's some differences between buying a non-performing loan from an institution versus an individual?
Depends on the individual, but it's really, institutional paper is usually very clean. Meaning they have everything organized in an order. They'll have a picture, they'll have a PDF or a JPEG of every billing statement that went out. You know, it might consist of 3,000 documents in that file. An individual might be 5 documents: the note, the mortgage, the pay history, and servicing notes and title. So that's one component. The next is, you know, dealing with an individual versus an institution. They expect you know what you're doing, and they want you to close, you know, in a reasonable amount of time. You know, if you're buying from an individual, sometimes they can be more flexible, or they'll be willing, if it's somebody who's new to the space, they'll help you out and be like, oh, here's kind of what you need to do. Here's what you should order. Hey, did you check on this? Hey, you know, and some, you know, individuals will kind of, you know, give information to the borrower, give them some, we'll call it, you know, insight on the loan. Institutions like, hey, here it is. But then again, on the same token, institution, if they really want to move it, and it's one that's kind of like a New York loan. New York loans are usually pretty hairy. You know, you can get on the phone with them and they'll tell you a lot of the details of what's going on.
Okay. Andrew says, holding fixed rate instruments like bonds or notes can be challenging in times of inflation, at least when inflation rates are so much higher than your note rate. That's on paper and in theory anyway. Does this reality impact you financially as you hold so many? If we enter into a recession, these will be gold.
So for the people who are originating paper and doing like seller financing, where I think they can have the challenge is, if they're originating stuff at 4% and 5%, you know, their loan is it's going to be illiquid, or they're going to have to take a pretty big haircut because, you know, today, and again, Andrew, I know you know mortgage rates much better than I do. But, you know, today's rates, you know, on probably a borrower in the 600s is probably, what, 5.5%, 6%, maybe even a little bit higher. So if you were underwriting that or originating that note at very low interest, it really more impacts your liquidity. You know, inflation is interesting with notes because it really comes down to, do you have a better place to put your money? You know, if you got a note and someone's paying you 6%, you know, and, you know, inflation hits and all of a sudden rates go up to 8%, yeah, you're going to be illiquid. But also, if house pricing is also, you know, starting to soften or coming down, do you want to buy a house that's depreciating, you know, basically is losing value, or do you want to get your 6%, even though inflation's at 8%? So technically, in theory, you're losing 2%, but I'd rather lose that than a $500,000 house that's all of a sudden worth 400,000, because think of what it's going to have to be to get back to that. So for us, when we're buying distressed stuff, where we look at it more of a macro level. And one of the things we started doing is when we're putting numbers to the properties, we'll use PropStream. I think William, you use it. A lot of people on here probably listen to it. We're looking at last year's value versus current value and kind of basing it off of that, because we're seeing stuff literally where the value of the property last year was $350. This year it's $500. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm not predicting by any means a 30% crash, but I also don't believe that $500,000 house is going to maintain a $500,000 value. I think it will soften. So you do have to take into consideration. But I think if we do enter recession, I think the note space is going to see more assets. Where I think you're going to see them, though, which is again a topic for a whole nother time, is bankruptcy. Which bankruptcy notes are awesome. Most people would be like, they're probably the worst thing on the planet. Bankruptcy notes, if you're buying it already in bankruptcy, is gold, because of the amount of information you find.
Right. Okay. All right, guys, that is going to be about it for today. We've kept Chris here for over an hour. Chris, we really appreciate you being here with us today. If y'all have questions, you can contact Chris at 7einvestments.com. And I think you said these guys can find out where you guys service notes on your website at buyfiles.com.
Yep. And if you don't see it on there, there's a contact form there. Fill out the contact form, ask the question, and Shante usually gets back to you within around 24 hours. So.
Okay. So awesome information. Thanks a bunch, Chris. We appreciate you.
Yep. Thanks for having me, William.
All right. You have a great day. All right, guys, that is it for this episode of Goat Talk. We appreciate you all being here. We'll see y'all next Thursday. So until then, you guys get out there, talk to some sellers, buy some houses.